Hey, welcome back. I'm Mike of Spectre Comics. Today I wanted to talk about alien character design or alien character creation. My Spectre Comics universe is set in outer space, so there's a lot of different planets, a lot of different environments, a lot of different cities, and definitely a lot of different alien species and creatures that populate my universe. So that leads me to need to create different alien characters to fill in different roles in my story. Now I wanted to talk about specifically that there's two types of character creation in my universe, in the way I work. The first one is, you need characters to kind of fill out the backgrounds of your spaces, to populate the world that you're creating, to make it look more populated. So they're the characters that linger in the backgrounds of your stories. And then the second type of character is the type of character that's either a main character that moves your story along, or they're the type of character that your main characters interact with, and thus have speaking lines, and maybe they have a name and a role to play in your story. In the case of the first group of characters, a lot of those are just quick thumbnail sketches. Take this scene when my main characters, Spark, Storbo, and Risa, landed on a space station outpost, walked into a cantina to get some information, and as we see them walking through the environment, they interact with the bartender, who's a character that I had to design, and then look at the background populated with various alien creatures. So these were just quick studies. I didn't really think much about them. I just sketched a room, threw some different aliens in there, and these were just quick studies. Now, the good thing about this is that I may be able to use some of these characters later on in my story, but for the time being, they're just populating this room. They're reacting to what's going on. When Storbo gets thrown out by the bouncer, these characters react to that commotion. So that's one type of character. The second type of character is like Arcko. Arcko is a character that I created for my Spectre story, became a main character in the story, but he didn't start out where I had a big description and I knew what he was going to be doing. He was just a character that I didn't have a story for when I originally created him. He was just a character that I created by sketching doodles around the edges of my notebooks while I was at work, actually. Here's a couple of early sketches. Sorry about the quality, but these are some very early sketches I did of Arcko when I first created him. At the time, he didn't have a name, he didn't have a species, he didn't have a backstory, but I created a character for my Spectre Comics, and I needed a character like this. And physically, the way he's built kind of filled the role of the character that I wrote into my story. So I basically modified him, and this is a picture of kind of finalizing the character from the original sketch. When I started to design him more to be a functioning character in the story, this is what he ended up looking like. Now let's get into the actual drawing, and I'll just talk about specifically about the character that Arcko became. Now again, he started as a quick sketch in a notebook around the edges of my notebook. You can see that he's a long, kind of skinny alien. He's got some fins on his head, some fins on his arms. So when I wrote this story, I had to give Arcko kind of a backstory. I needed to know what his mission was. I needed to know what his job was. So when I created Arcko, I had to kind of create this whole story behind him because he was now serving a major role in my Spectre story. Originally, he was just this character, but now he was going to play a major role in my Spectre Comics story, and he was going to be a major player that my main characters, Spark, Storbo, and Risa, were going to interact with throughout the story once they came across him. Plus, he added to a little mystery at the beginning, first couple of issues of the story, because you kind of got hints of him, and then he was kind of following them, and then they met for the first time. So Arcko became a very important character, and the cool thing about Arcko is that I liked him so much as a character, not only his design, but just his story, that at some point I'm going to go back, probably when I finish my 8 issues of this current Spectre comic run. I'm on issue 6 right now. I've got 2 more to go. I want to go back and do an Arcko story, one that talks about what he was doing before he interacted with Spark, Storbo, and Risa, the main characters of the Spectre comics. I want to kind of follow Arcko because there's a lot of mystery to his beginning, and we didn't get an opportunity to see what he was doing leading up to meeting the Spectre, meeting Spark, Storbo, and Risa. So again, and I even may just do an offshoot comic of him, of his adventures, because I like this character so much. And so he'll evolve as time goes on. But the cool thing is, so I'll talk about a little bit about him as a character and his role. Arcko had a simple backstory. One thing I do when I create characters is that I talk about where they came from. They usually have a home world. I give them an occupation, and then I give them a mission. Why are they doing what they're doing? So Arcko's background is Arcko is an optling. He's a creature or a being from the planet Optos, and his job is to be a scout for the optling government or society. I don't like to use the word government. I would just want to imply that there's a species of characters and certain people, certain beings have certain roles within the society, and Arcko's job is to be a scout. And his job is to track the activities of a adversarial race, adversarial to the optling society race of beings called the Ori. And the Ori are from a nearby moon that orbits Optos, and they're similar in look and stature to the optlings, but the optlings are a little more advanced and a little more civilized, and their job is to kind of keep tabs on what the Oris are doing, because although both societies go out into the universe to look for resources for their planets, which is the theme throughout a lot of my stories, that's what the Spectre are doing. Their job is to find resources for their homeworld. What the Ori like to do is take it from societies that exist, not just finding uninhabited planets to take resources. They actually harm other societies to get their way. So what Arcko's job is to follow the Ori around the galaxy, keep tabs on their activities, and make sure they're not harming other worlds. So that's his job, and that's why he's doing what he's doing. Now, another aspect of optling society is that they have each optling character or each optling person has a counterpart, a small blob called a Startle. And the motivation for Arcko to be out in the world is that he lost his Startle. Now, the interesting thing about the Startle and the optling, they're very symbiotic in their relationship. They have a mental connection with each other, and they can kind of see and feel what the other one sees, even if they're separated by great distances. And so part of Arcko's motivation is he lost his Startle. He doesn't know if he was kidnapped. He doesn't know if he was just got lost and they got separated. Part of the Arcko story that I'm going to tell before is like how they got separated and when they went their separate ways. So Arcko's current mission is not only to keep tabs on what the adversarial race, the Ori, are doing, who is the major antagonist of my Spectre comic story overall, but to find his primary mission is to find his Startle and get them back together. Now, the cool thing is, because they're separated and they have this mental connection, Arcko gets frequent hints at where he is and who he's with by having the mental connection. That originally when I wrote the story, I didn't really know how I was going to make that connection and how it was going to tie into pushing the story along. But I found that if there was frequent interactions in their mind, they could communicate, and then it would give hints on where to go next in their story. So when Arcko runs across the Spectre, they end up teaming up and going on the same mission, because now they have a common adversary and they're looking for similar things. In other words, Arcko's looking for his Startle, who is with the Ori, and the Spectre are looking for other missing Spectre characters from their world. So that's part of the backstory of Arcko. So let's talk about Arcko's physical attributes, the way he's designed. Now, if you look at the original picture I showed, the original sketch, he was this tall, lanky, skinny alien character, thin legs, thin arms, a tall, skinny body, a round head, fins on the back of his head, fins on his arms. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about how the character evolved from that original sketch to then the character that is finalized and in the comics now. So again, I wanted him to be long and skinny. I wanted him to have fins, just as a feature, a unique feature. I added fins to his head and his arms. I ditched the really skinny arms and the very small, thin feet. And the reason I did this is because I felt a lot of my characters were starting to look similar, and I wanted to give characters a little more uniqueness, a little more unique features. So you'll see that Arcko from the original sketch he just had very skinny forearms, whereas his current design, he still has skinny arms, but they're covered with these protective arm braces. And the reason I did that is because I wanted the braces to have a function. I kind of think back, and I actually created this character before I ever played this video game, which is called Enslaved. But one of the main character you play, Monkey, in the game Enslaved, had these forearm braces, because he's a fighter, and he had a weapon attached to it, which was a telescoping, I will call it a bow staff, that he used when he was in battle. So similarly, I wanted Arcko's arm braces to have functions other than just be protective. They would house technology such as holographic information, almost like a holographic computer that he can draw information upon, show things, and through the story he uses them for various things. But they also serve to house a similar type of telescoping bow staff that he can store in one of the arms and then take it out when he needs it to fight enemies if they come into contact. So another feature, so again, long and skinny, he has fins, he has arms. I also gave him very large feet and baggy pants. And the reason I did this is because all of my characters tend to wear these like skin tight outfits. And I wanted to kind of get into a little more designing of actual clothes. So I gave him, even though he's wearing a tight kind of vest type shirt with a integral backpack that kind of straps over, and the straps kind of come down on his chest, hold his backpack in place. He can store mission items in the backpack, but he also has baggy pants. They're not cargo pants, but they kind of have the bagginess of cargo pants. And then I gave him these very large feet. I didn't want him to have what typically ends up being in a lot of my designs, these very skinny feet, very narrow standard feet. I wanted him to have almost like saucer kind of feet, big feet. So that became part of his design. Now, another thing I wanted physically for him to do is to have the ability to climb. Kind of like he is a green, if you see from the color image I showed a while back. I wanted him to he kind of reminds me of a lizard type character. He's got the fins on his head. He's got green skin. I wanted him to have the ability to climb, and as part of the story goes on, they're going to be in this environment where they're on an asteroid, and they're going to be climbing rocks, whereas all of the Spectre characters need to use different gear to climb and traverse the mountainside. Arcko's going to be able to climb very easily up and down the rock cliffs because he has the ability to climb. So again, I gave him that attribute. So let's talk quickly about the Startle character. Now, this character I designed completely separate from when I designed Arcko. They were just, again, he just started out as a scribble in a book. But again, I liked him so much. I did a couple of early drawings where I showed him, this little blob just being very full of expression. And he, in turn, I thought, let's create these characters as a team. This had come about when I was writing the Spectre story, and I needed a character, which ended up being Arcko. I wanted him to have motivation for going out into the world and crossing paths with the Spectre. So I used this other character I created to be the character that he interacted with. So I named him Splo. It just sounds like a blob's name. Each Optling has a Startle, and they're part of their society. It's just normal. So losing one would be a big deal. So if you lost your personal Startle, you wouldn't want to go out and find them because they're part of your world. They're part of your living and your being. It's just normal part of society on the planet Optos. The design of this character, I created this blobby character with really just eyes, no other means of expression other than the shape of his body. And so he is very expressive with his eyes and the way he's hiding or moving or interacting. They're very small characters. They're easy to miss. They can hide easily. They're quick. They can actually move quickly. They can fit into tiny spaces. So that's the backstory of this. And there's a scene that is in my current comic that I'm working on. Issue 6 that I'm working on now starts with the Startles perspective. And the reason is because we left Arcko in a vision at the end of issue 5. We pick up on issue 6. We're moving the story along. And now we're changing perspective of the characters where we start figuring out a little more about what the Ori are up to and where they are. And that helps move the Spectre characters along to the next phase of their story. So we get a small glimpse into from Splo's perspective, from the Startles perspective, before we transition back to Arcko and the Spectre's story moving forward. So that's a little bit about the background of the background story and the physical characteristics and how I created Arcko and Splo for my Spectre Comics story. Now again, character design is very interesting. It tends to evolve. You tend to start with very simple schematic quick sketch drawings of each character, but what ends up being, they end up evolving over time and developing into the characters that you end up using in your story. And I always find it interesting because the way I kind of describe how characters are is that characters have a way of evolving over time. And the more you get to know them, you get to develop and see how their personality. It's hard to just impose a personality onto a character right off the bat. So what I find interesting is, actually, if you ever kind of watch an old sitcom and you watch the first season compared to later seasons, like even take Seinfeld. Seinfeld had Kramer as a character. If you watch Kramer in season 1 as opposed to later seasons, 5, 6, 7, 8, I think there was 9 seasons. When you watch Kramer in the first season, he's a completely different character. He wasn't as outrageous and he didn't have all of his characteristics that we become familiar with. But as the actor learned how to be that character, the character evolved into what we understand as that character today. So I'll take my Spectre comics. A lot of my characters have personalities, but when I first was writing them, they were very, I don't want to call them stiff, but they were very not defined. And as the stories developed and they interacted a little more, I got to know how the characters were and how they would act and how they would respond to something, whatever situation they're in, how they would talk to each other. It becomes part of the personality that develops over time as you write your characters and as you draw more. So Arcko's similar in this way. I'm still developing his personality. Arcko's an interesting character, though, and I do look forward to seeing what he turns out to be a little more and diving more into. I think when I get him off into his own story and he interacts with others of his own world on Aptos, I think I might be able to see what kind of character he turns into. So that's just a little background on character design and not only character design in the drawing part, but also the background story. So that's it for this video. I enjoyed talking about this character design, not only in the physical design of his physical characteristics, but also the background and the backstory and his motivations, because I think that whole package is what makes good character design. So I hope you had fun, just kind of listen to me drone on for a little bit. And if you like the video, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel if you want more content from me. Leave a comment. Let me know what you thought about character design. Do you have any tips or tricks on how to create characters yourself? I'm going to go into a little more detail on other characters that are part of the Spectre universe and character design in general, mostly about aliens, because aliens are the main inhabitants of the Spectre universe. So that's it for this video. I hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching and have a good day.